Coop.
Good afternoon and Shabbat Shalom, everyone, to a nice warm Sabbath here in Irving, Texas. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, to those here and those on the outreach. And the title of today's message is, The Devil Made Me Do It. Yeah, we got a couple folks laughing in the back. Everyone remembers the old Flip Wilson line, right? Everyone remember Flip Wilson? Well, there's some of us here not young enough, not old enough to know Flip. He was a comedian, for us older folks, back in the day. He had this line he used all the time. But when he said it, it was funny because he had this way he could deliver it. He had a special knack, if you will, for delivering such a line. But it was the devil made me do it. Because what we're going to talk about today is the nature of sin. Mostly from where does it come? Because there's a common teaching, if you will, going about in many churches. And not just Sunday church. I mean, if it's a church of any stripe or nature that cites this as their authority, any common teaching going about many churches today, both Sunday and Sabbath keeping, by the way, that all sin is attributable to either the devil himself or demons. And what we're going to do today, in part one of this study, is go through the nature of sin. From where does it start? Where does it take us from there? And how does temptation, if you will, go into full-blown sin? And at what part do demons or devils or the devil himself, what part does he play in this? Does he play a role in this? Or is it all on us? Or is it a bit of both? Well, this is, like I said, some things are going to be part, and most likely the element concerning demons are going to be most likely in part two. Because we're going to start with something straightforward on sin itself. We're going to start with our part in this. Yes, David.
I was just going to say, sin partly comes from when we put our own desires before Yahweh's.
Yes, David, you're correct. And we're going to see a pattern of this, David, in case those who did not hear. David said, sin begins when we put our own desires, our own will, ahead of that of Yahweh's. And David's spot on this. And actually, we're going to see this in story time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a few scriptures regarding sin and the human heart, if you will. Not the muscle, but the heart. I'm going to discuss our role in this, and then we're going to go into story time. I got a couple stories referenced here, and we probably won't get to all of them, but nonetheless, let's open up to Jeremiah 17, please. Let's start there. We're going to be going to the book of James a couple times over, too. So let's start with Jeremiah 17. A lot of us here know that one. But like David pointed out in his study, we can get forgetful sometimes, right? Jeremiah chapter 17. Put my eyes on. And verse 9. The heart is deceitful above all things, and it is desperately wicked. And who can understand this? Because I, Yahweh, I search the heart and I test the mind. And I even give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings.
Where are you again, Curtis?
Jeremiah 17, verses 9 and 10.
Right. Thank you.
So we're starting here with Jeremiah saying that the heart is evil, that it is wicked above all things. But then in creation, weren't all things good when Yahweh had finished all these things?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was, and we'll get to that eventually. We'll get to that in due season. But let's see what else was said about the human heart. Let's turn to Ecclesiastes, please. Ecclesiastes 9. start in verse 1. Read the first 3 verses of Ecclesiastes 9. For I considered all this in my heart, Solomon says, so that I could declare it, and that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of Elohim. People know neither love nor hatred by anything that they see before them. All things come alike to all. One event happens to the righteous and the wicked, the good, the clean, and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and to him who does not. As is the good, so is the sinner. He who takes an oath and he who fears an oath. This is an evil that is done under the sun. One thing happens to all. Imagine that. Certain things just happen to everybody, regardless of your standing. Madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that, they go to the dead. What does Solomon mean here when he says that one thing happens to the righteous and the unrighteous, the clean and the unclean, to those who take vows, those who do not, the righteous and the wicked? That's summed up in verse 11, remaining in Ecclesiastes 9. I returned and I saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor is the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the men of understanding, nor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. Time and chance happens to us all. Sometimes people are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Things happen, we do not know why. No one is immune to time and circumstance. Let's turn over to Mark 7, please. Mark 7, we'll start in verse 20. Continuing on in the heart. Mark 7, we'll read verses 20 through 23. Yahshua speaking, he said, now whatever comes out of a man, that is what defiles a man. From within, out of the heart of man, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, theft, covetousness, wickedness, an evil eye, lewdness, blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. And all of these come from within a man and defile him. Very similar saying is found in Matthew 15. Matthew 15. And with while we're flipping there, the usual drill. If you have a question or a comment, get your hand up. I'll call on you. Don't be afraid to raise your hand up if you got a question or a comment. No such thing as a stupid question here. All I ask is that all questions and commentary be kept to the topic at hand. Matthew 15. We'll read verse 8, then we'll go from 11 through 20. Matthew 15, verse 8. These people, you hypocrites, Joshua says, well did Isaiah the prophet prophesy about you, saying, these people draw near to me with their mouth, and they honor me with their lips. But their heart is far from me, and in vain they worship me, and teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. He called the multitude, verse 10, he said to them, hear and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man, but what comes out of the mouth that defiles a man. Then his disciples came and said to him, well, don't you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying? Why would they be offended? because they understood him. On more than one occasion, as one reviews the Gospels, you'll see that the Pharisees got their feelings hurt over something Yahshua said because they did understand him.
They're pricked in their hearts.
They were pricked in their hearts, but they had the wrong reaction. You're correct, David. Verse 12, the disciples came and said, don't you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying? But he heard and said, well, every plant my heavenly Father has not planted will be uprooted. Leave them alone. They're blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind leads the blind, both will fall into a ditch. And Peter answered them and said to him, well, please, explain this parable to us. Joshua, he's probably getting exasperated by it because this is not the first time that he's had this roll around with him. He said, are you also still without understanding? He's probably thinking, oh no, these guys still don't get it. I mean, remember, he's full of flesh and blood at this time, right? If he suffered all things as we all did, he knows what a little exasperation can be like, right? The scribes and Pharisees are offended. They got their feelings hurt because they did understand it. These are his disciples, one he's trying to teach all the secrets and teachings of the kingdom, man. It's like nothing's penetrating. It's bouncing off their forehead. They don't get it. He says, are you still without understanding? Do you not yet understand, verse 17, that whatever enters the mouth into the stomach is eliminated? As you eat it, you consume it one end, it goes back out the other. But those things which proceed out of the mouth of man come from the heart, and they defile a man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witnesses, and blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile a man. So according to Yahshua, we're not defiled or contaminated just because we didn't wash our hands. Or wash your hands a certain way like they prescribed. It wasn't, now this hand, when he spoke of washing hands or unwashed hands, he doesn't mean like Mama told us to. Wash your hands and get it all the way up before you eat. That's not what he meant. He meant this special ritual hand washing, cleansing, that they undoubtedly copied from the priest. A lot of detail is that given in Matthew 7 and Mark 7. I'll just give you that for reference. Let's try James. What does James have to say about it? First, before we go to James, let's go to Romans 1. Romans 1. Romans 1, and we will fast forward to verse 29. And go through the rest of the chapter. All right, so let's back up to verse 28. I think it's better. Let's back up to verse 28. Even if they did not like to retain Yahweh in their knowledge, Yahweh gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, they are backbiters, haters of Yahweh, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things. You mean they're inventing this themselves? They're disobedient to their parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. Who? Those knowing the righteous judgment of Yahweh, and those that practice such things are deserving of death. Not only who do the same, but also who approve of those who practice them. But I found this little comment right here. Inventors of evil things. I mean, when a man's heart is not right with his Maker, with his Creator, with Yahweh, you can be inventors of all evil things. You mean there's no. So far, I see very little things of any demonic involvement. I don't see a demon taking a pitchfork to a guy's back end, say, you better do this, I'll give you worse than that. And we'll talk about their role in part 2. And a lot of these things in part 2, but nonetheless, he's saying men here. He's talking about men, flesh and blood. Any question or comment? Anybody, it doesn't matter. Okay, with that, let's go to James 1:15. What we're doing here at first, it's like I said at the beginning, we're covering the issues of the heart. James 1:15. Let's just back up to verse 12. My mistake. I wrote this down wrong. I wanted to start in verse 12. Because this is actually the conclusion of all the matter about the human heart. Now, I'm sure there are other scriptures discussing the human heart. And I'm sure I missed a couple along the way, but nonetheless, I think these will suffice about the condition of the human heart. Blessed is the man, verse 12, James 1, verse 12. Blessed is one who endures temptation, for when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which Yahweh promised to those who love him. And let no one say when he is tempted, well, I'm tempted by Yahweh. Why not? Because, for James continues to explain, for Yahweh cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. So if, let's let that be understood. Yahweh will subject us to trials and testing to ensure that we are approved, but in terms of temptation that will lead to sin, no. Because in his trials and tests, when we're tested and tried, he always leaves a way out. He knows exactly what we can endure. Verse 14, but each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Comes back to what David said earlier. When we put our own desires ahead of the desires and the will of Yahweh. Each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. It doesn't say Satan's, it doesn't say a demon's, it says his own. Then, when desire has conceived, okay? First starts with the conceiving of a desire. It gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, it brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my fellow brethren. So we see the importance of keeping our hearts clean, our minds clean. Focused on the will of Yahweh. Does anyone have any question or comment? Because now we're about to go into story time. Since there's none, I'm going to presume that everyone is more interested in story time than making a question or comment right now. That's fine. Now, can anyone think of an example in Scripture? I'll just throw a question out.
Absalom.
Can anyone think of a place in Scripture where we might have a cast of characters and some of these principles these teachings might come into play? Trey.
David.
David, very good. I have David in my notes. Let's just go there. We got the story of David. Very good, Trey. Let's start in 2 Samuel 26, please. No, that's not the right place. That's second.
Samuel.
I think I got that written down wrong. Because 2 Samuel is actually the story. Yeah, 2 Samuel. I'm correct the first time. I don't know what I'm thinking about. I guess my call. That still doesn't sound right. Did I? No, I'd have written something down wrong. Oh, no wonder, okay. Yeah, it is 2 Samuel. But there is no second, I know I've written, 2 Samuel 24, excuse me. I don't know why I wrote down 26. It's 24, 2 Samuel 24. This is David's consensus, David's census. When he gives the census to order, he gives the order to Joab to order the census of Israel. 2 Samuel 24. I don't know why I wrote down 26.
What chapter?
2 Samuel chapter 24, starting verse 1. 2 Samuel 24, verse 1. Again, the anger of Yahweh was aroused against David. And he moved David to them, saying, go number the...
No, not that one. It's 11. 2 Samuel 11.
Oh, you're thinking of another example, okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about when he got the wife of Uriah.
The wife of Uriah, okay.
His own lesson.
Yeah, because that's the story I'd rather... This is an account I got in my notes, but I'd rather save that one for part 2, actually.
Yeah.
Truth be known. Yeah, we got all sorts of stories. I should have asked for... put that one on me. I should have asked for clarity which one you meant.
It's okay.
2 Samuel 12. Let's go to that one instead. I want to say the one in 26 for next time, actually. It would be a better fit.
Starting 11.
Okay, starting 11. 2 Samuel 11.
Yeah.
Okay, this is when David is going to war. 2 Samuel verse 11. It happened in the spring of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle. Back then, they didn't have the technology that we do today, and going to war in the dead of winter was not a good idea. Kings and armies and soldiers did not like doing battle in the wintertime. They wanted to avoid that every chance they got. And all of Israel, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they destroyed the people of Ammon, and they besieged Rabbah. But David remained in Jerusalem. He's not out leading his men. He's staying behind in Jerusalem. Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed, and he walked out on the roof of the king's house. And he saw, from the roof, he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold. So David sent and inquired about this woman. Gets a report back. Someone said, "It is not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent messengers and took her. And she came to him. And he lay with her, for she was cleansed from her impurity. And she returned to her house. And then he hears back a little bit later. The story's not over with. The woman, verse 5, the woman conceived, and she told David, "I'm with a child." Guess what, David? And then David sent, okay, now David's in a little pickle here. It's bad enough. Now remember what was in, so far, I don't see the devil making David do any of this. Remember, we've talked about all the conditions of a man's heart. Evidently, David had, he had a thing for beautiful women. I'll leave it at that. Just like somebody else we know in Scripture, a fellow named Samson, as I recall. So now he's having a baby with another fellow's wife. And David sent, so he's got a pickle here. What didn't we read about adulteries? And I seem to recall us reading about adultery in the last few passages. I think we did. David said to Joab, saying, "Well, send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah had come to him, verse 7, David asked how Joab was doing, and he asked how the people were doing, and how the war was going, how the war prospered. David said to Uriah, okay, now go down to your house, go wash your feet. So Uriah departed from the king's house, and the gift of food from the king followed him. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his master, and did not go down to his own house. So I think we know what David's up to. Now he's trying to get Uriah to lay down with his wife and pass off the baby as his. So when he told King David, saying, Uriah did not go down to his own house, David said to Uriah, did you not come from a journey? Why didn't you go down to your own house? Uriah says to David, verse 11, the ark of Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents. My master Joab and all the servants of my master are encamped in open fields. Shall I then go to my own house and eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul is, I will not do this thing. It's a good soldier, a good general, a good officer, a good general. You know, he's dedicated not only to his master the king and to his master Joab, and David, the king. But as a leader, he's also devoted to the men under him. He has a respect for I said, you're a man, Joab's man, and my own men are, we're sleeping in open fields. You want me to go home and sleep with my wife in their bed? They're doing without their own wives. They want to go home and eat their wives' food, and their wives' cooking and lay down with their own wife. But while they're at war, I'm not going to do this. He's not trying to be insubordinate to the king. He's being a good soldier. All it is, nothing more, nothing less. He's being what one's supposed to be. Verse 12. David said to Uriah, wait here today and also tomorrow, and I will let you depart. We keep seeing this phrase several times in Scripture. Wait here a day or two, and then tomorrow, the next day, I'll let you depart. What happens every time we hear this line? Bad stuff happens.
Trying to be deceived.
Trying to be deceived. Well, let's think about it this way. Every time we hear this little phrase, nothing good comes of it. In Judges, we read the story, or the account, I should say, of the priest. This wandering priest with his wife, and how he stopped in Benjamin with his wife, and he wanted to get going, but they stayed and lingered and lingered and lingered. And it went from bad to worse there. There's a few other stories like that. We can just tack that one on in the list. Now when David, verse 13, had called him, he ate and he drank before him, and he made him drunk. At evening he went down to lie on his bed with the servants of his master, but he did not go to his own house. He still wouldn't go home to his wife. In the morning, it happened that David wrote a letter to Joab, sent it by the hand of Uriah. He wrote in a letter, set Uriah in the forefront of the hottest part of the battle, and retreat from it, that he may be struck down and he might die. So what do we got going here? Don't we read of murders and plots to murders in the previous scriptures? We read about the failings of the human heart, blasphemies, murders. David's got a problem. His way out of it first is to deceive Uriah, to go home laying with his wife, make him think the baby's his. First it was the adultery got him here. Then it was this, and now he's not going to do it. So, and eventually he knows Uriah's going to find out. So, no. His idea, at least in his own understanding, when he's relying on his own understanding, is to kill off Uriah. You know what's so sad about this, or could be infuriating about this? Remember, he wrote this letter, put his seal on it, has the man he's about to kill take it to Joab, to his boss in the field, if you will. And the letter says here, kill the messenger. Yes, David.
It's going back to the previous verses we read. Basically, the lust of David developed into sin, and when that sin became full grown, it became the death.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what we're seeing, just like James described. Yes, David. You're following me very well.
Yep.
For those who do not hear, David is referred back to James, what we read earlier in James, about the lust and leading to temptation, the temptation leading to sin, and the sin into death. We see that literally happening right here in this account. Fast forwarding a little bit, verse 16, Joab besieges the city, assigns Uriah to where he knew they were valiant men. Verse 17, then the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the people of the servants of David fell. And Uriah the Hittite died also. So not wasn't just Uriah who died, but the men that followed him. Some of his own soldiers died in the battle. Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war. And he charged the messenger, saying, when you have finished telling the matters of the war to the king, if it happens that the king's wrath arises, and he says to you, why did you approach so near to the city when you fought? Then you know that they would shoot down from the wall. You know, why'd you go within, bow and arrow range? Don't shoot down bow and arrow. Why did you come within range of the archers? Who struck Abimelech, the son of Jerushuba? Was it not the woman who cast out a piece of millstone from the wall so that he died? And this is he's referencing a story back in Judges. Back in Judges. So why did you go so near to the wall? Then you'll say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So the messenger went, told David all the things that Joab had sent by him. And the messenger said to David, surely the men prevailed against us, and they came out to the field. We drove them back as far as the entrance of the gate, and the archers shot from the wall at your servants, and killing some of the king's servants are dead. And your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. David said to the messenger, thus you shall say to Joab, do not let this thing displease you, for the sword devours one as well as another. You mean something similar his son would say later? Wow. Doesn't that reminisce of what his son Solomon said much later, as an older man? Much later, as after David was dead and gone? A lesson he learned very well from his daddy. You got to commend Solomon for that. Strengthen your attack, continuing in verse 25. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it. So encourage him. Verse 26, when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she mourned for her husband. Verse 27, when her mourning was over, David sent and brought her into his house, and she became his wife, and she bore him a son. But this thing had displeased Yahweh, because this story's not over yet. Fast forwarding a little bit, the child gets sick. He dies. So it was an evil thing in Yahweh's eye for this child to become the king of Israel, evidently. And after that, much later, Solomon is born. To him and Bathsheba. Let's try another story here. So in spite of all the commendations that Yahweh has, before we go to our other story, in spite of all the commendations that Yahweh has given David about being a man of his own heart, look how he fell short. And we'll address this in the closing, where and how and why he fell short. Let's go back all the way to the beginning. Let's go back to the garden. We got this in Genesis. We have that in my notes. The very beginning, because this has been an issue since almost since the beginning. Creation has been finished. Adam and Eve have a good life in the garden. They have one job: to tend to the garden. They can eat from anything in the garden they wish, except for one tree, the knowledge of good and evil. But they're welcome to everything else there. Because what's the first lesson here? There's a difference between temptation and testing, right? However, nonetheless, it is not Yahweh who did the temptation. We got someone else doing the temptation here. Now the serpent, Genesis 3, chapter 3, verse 1. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field, which Yahweh had made. And he said to the woman, well, has Yahweh indeed said to you that you won't eat every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, oh, we may eat of the trees of the fruit of the garden, but the fruit of that tree over there, says the tree of which is in the midst of the garden, Yahweh has said, well, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, well, come on, you're not going to die, because for Yahweh knows, verse 5, in the day you eat of this, your eyes are going to be opened. Your eyes are going to be opened, and you will be like Yahweh, and you will know good from evil. You're going to be enlightened. You're going to be wise. So he's teasing her a little bit. So when a woman saw that the tree, verse 6, was good for food, and it was pleasant to the eye, it looked good, very pleasant to the eye, and the tree desirable to make one wise after all. Okay, so she desired wisdom. Well, I want to be wise. I don't want to go around being stupid all the time. I want to be wise. One of the appeals. Some appeal that we've covered already. She took the fruit and she ate it. And she gave it to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. Well, they wanted to be wise. They wanted to know good from evil. Well, they got their knowledge all right. They got their knowledge. They got their wisdom all right. But what else? What happened following? That was, well, it was bad news. Virtually for everyone involved. Verse 9, Yahweh called out to Adam and said that he's walking. Yahweh's taking him a little walk in the garden. Now, this is not the Father. We got to remember, this is not the Father. So who do we know this to be? The one we know is come to know as Joshua, right? Said to him, calls out to Adam. Adam hides himself, and he said, "Where are you?" Verse 10 says, "Well, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I went and hid myself." And he said, "Well, who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you that you should not eat?" He already knew, but he's laying this inquisition for this inquiry at Adam's feet. And the man said, he ponies up and admits his own guilt, right? He said, "Look, I should have stepped up, ponied up. I should have stood up between the shady character, this used car salesman, and my wife." No, Adam remained silent. It's like Bob says a lot. Perfect fear drives out love, right? Yahweh said to the woman, the man, but he says, "Well, this woman you gave me, she ate of the tree and I ate it too." No sale. Yahweh doesn't buy it. He says, Yahweh says to the woman, "Well, what is this you've done?" To the woman, he says, "Well, the serpent deceived me and I ate it." Okay, at least Eve was deceived. That's explained in the book of Hebrews as well. How Eve was deceived, but Adam was not. "Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle, no more than beasts of the field, and on your belly you shall go, and on your belly, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and keep her seed. And between you and the woman, between her seed and her seed, he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. To the woman, he says. So that's his so-called blessing for the serpent. To the woman, he says, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and conception, and in pain you will bring forth children, and your desire shall be for your husband, he shall rule over you. And to Adam, he says, because you've heeded the voice of your wife, and you've eaten from the tree which I commanded you, saying, don't eat this. Cursed is the ground on account of your sake, and in the toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles shall bring forth from you. And you shall eat of the herb of the field. And the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. So they're going to have to start planting and growing now. They couldn't just take care of the garden. Now they're going to have to grind it to bread and everything. For out of the ground, out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Fast forward to verse 22. Then Yahweh said, behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. Now lest he put out his hand, and take also the tree of life, eat and live forever. Therefore Yahweh sent him out of the garden of Eden to till the ground which he was taken. Well, he was taken to grounds where he could till, he could farm, but he was going to do it all from scratch. He was going to do all the work. He drove out the man, and he placed the cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, the flaming sword which turned every which way to guard the way to the tree of life. So he put an armed guard to make sure that they weren't going to sneak back in here and eat the tree of life. Any question or comment so far? Yes, David.
To highlight the same concept in this story, Eve's lust for the fruit.
Eve's lust for the fruit. That is correct. Just like we read earlier about the condition of the human heart.
Yeah, it brought forth sin, and when that sin came to its fullest,
The same pattern.
there was a death in chapter 3, verse 21.
Mm-hmm.
We noticed that Yahweh made coats of skin to clothe
Them.
So those coats of skin came from an animal that died.
Mm-hmm. That died in their place
Yes.
to cover them.
Lust, sin, sin to death.
The same pattern.
Yes.
Lust to sin, lust to temptation, temptation to sin, sin to death.
Now his Torah clothes us. His Torah is our covering, which is
Mhm.
the works of the saints, which are good deeds, which bring on the clothing that we're supposed to have so we're not naked.
Now let's try one more. Let us try one more. Let's go to 2 Chronicles 33, please. I'm going to try one more count here. 2 Chronicles 33. This is the account of King Manasseh. King Manasseh. 2 Chronicles 33, verse 1. Now Manasseh was 12 years old when he became the king, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. A long time. But he did evil in the sight of Yahweh, according to all the abominations of whom Yahweh had cast out before the children of Israel. Didn't we read about abominations earlier in the, I seem to recall that? In some of the descriptions of the human heart? For he built the high places, verse 3. He built the high places which Hezekiah his father had torn down. And he raised up altars for the Baals. And he made wooden images. And he worshipped all the hosts of heaven, and he served them. all the reforms that his daddy, King Hezekiah, had done, he tore them all down just like that. Or he raised them back up, I should say. He built houses, or he built altars in the house of Yahweh, of which Yahweh he said, "No, in Jerusalem shall my name be forever." And he built altars for all the heaven and the two courts of the house of Yahweh. He also caused his sons to pass through the fire in the valley of the sons of Hinnom. Wow. Now, this is not just some special little dedication, like a Catholic priest, would do. No, when these Israelites outdid the nations, because when they passed the kids through the fire, they took that quite literally. He practiced soothsaying, used witchcraft and sorcery, consulted mediums and spiritists. Why would he do things like that? Because they're going to teach him pleasantries. They're going to teach him all the pleasant things, lovely things that tickle his ear. Tell him how wonderful he is. What an old fuddy-duddy his daddy really was. He did very much evil in the sight of Yahweh to provoke him to anger. He even set a carved image, the idol which he had made in the house of Yahweh, of which Yahweh had said to David and Solomon, his son, "In the house of Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. And I will not again remove the foot of Israel from the land which they have appointed for your fathers, only if they are careful to do all that I have commanded them, according to the whole law, the statutes, and the ordinances by the hand of Moses." So Manasseh seduced Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem to do more evil than the nations whom Yahweh had destroyed before the children of Israel. They didn't just adopt their customs. They put on a clinic on how this was supposed to be done there, because they did even more evil. They did more evil, and what they did was even worse. After Yahweh, verse 10, spoke to Manasseh and his people, but they wouldn't listen. Therefore, how would Yahweh speak to the king, Manasseh, and the people? Same way he'd always done, through prophets. Mostly. He would send messengers, he would send prophets. People didn't listen. Remember, now, there's no demon or anything making these people do this. No one's being forced to do this. They're doing it willingly. It just took a simple enticement from a man, following his own desires of his own heart, just like we read of in James. Of a lust leading to temptation, a temptation leading to sin, sin leading to death. The pattern continues, just like James said. Therefore, verse 11, Yahweh brought upon them the captains of the army of the king of Assyria, who took Manasseh with hooks, bound him with bronze fetters, and they carried him off to Babylon. So they got him a prisoner. They took Manasseh to be a prisoner. Now when he was in affliction, he implored Yahweh's Elohim and humbled himself greatly before the mighty one of his fathers. Oh, now he gets it. But sometimes that cycle can be broken. But still, it takes repentance to break these cycles. Because let's keep reading here. And after this, when he was in great affliction, verse 12, he implored Yahweh his Elohim and humbled himself greatly before the mighty one of his fathers. So now he's going into repentance. Humbles himself before Yahweh, and he prayed to him, and he received, and Yahweh, he received his entreaty. He received the entreaty or the prayer of Manasseh. He heard his supplication and brought him back to Jerusalem unto his kingdom. It was then Manasseh knew that Yahweh was the mighty one. So what does he do? Was he followed up? This one at least has some kind of a happy ending, if you will. It's not this story's not all bad. He built a wall, verse 14. He built a wall outside the city of David on the west side of Gahan in the valley, as far as the entrance of the fish gate. So he rebuilt all the walls that were torn down in the siege of Jerusalem. He raised it to a very great height, and he put military captains on all the fortified cities of Jerusalem. Verse 15, he took away the foreign gods and the idol from the house of Yahweh. That is the temple, all the idols he had placed into the temple itself. And all the altars that he had built in the mount of the house of Yahweh and in Jerusalem, he cast them all out of the city. So all these foreign high places, altars he had built, he tore them back down, just like his daddy did. But there's some kind of happy ending here in this one, but however, it's still not too good. He repaired the altar of Yahweh, and he sacrificed peace offerings and thank offerings on it, and he commanded Judah to serve Yahweh of Israel. Nevertheless, there's still a different ending here. Remember when his daddy Hezekiah, when he tore down all the high places, he restored the true worship, starting with, of all things, the Passover. The people received it greatly. Not this time. Nevertheless, because of verse 17, the people still sacrificed on the high places. Oh, wait. People still sacrifice on the high places, but only Yahweh their Elohim. Okay, well, they followed the king for a little while. He led the people back to worship Yahweh for a season, but then after that, it's pretty much downhill. Except for a couple of kings later, Josiah. He has to start from scratch later on. But it's the same pattern. We still have this same pattern. What? Lust to temptation, temptation to sin, then sin to death. Yes, David.
Yeah, you were reading 17. I don't think that was looked upon as favorable for them, even though they were sacrificing to Yahweh. They were still doing it in the high places, which we know Yahweh told them,
don't do this.
Learn the customs of those
People,
of the land and do that.
So it wasn't. So
it still held accountable to them that they were using a custom of.
it's like Moses told the people, don't worship the pagan deities, and don't worship Yahweh in the way in which they worship the way the pagans gods were worshipped.
Right.
And that's exactly what these people seem to be doing. For the same pattern. We saw Manasseh sees the deaths of so many of his sons. However many of the people that died when the Syrians come in and took him and some of the people away. Because the death is not always just physical. In this case, if the people never really came back full swing into the worship of Yahweh like Hezekiah had led them to, what kind of death was this? Even if they did survive the attack on Jerusalem from the Assyrian army. What death was this?
Spiritual.
Thank you, David. Spiritual death. Their spirits died. They didn't seem to recover from that. But in all these passages and we've covered so far, and all the conditions of the human heart we read of earlier, maybe it's just me, but I don't see a demon forcing anyone at gunpoint to do any of these things. So much of it is the faults and failings of our heart, of our own heart. When we have evil lust, our heart is not right with Yahweh. We have all the abominations, blasphemies, adultery, all those other things that these previous scriptures described. So in the end, what do? Let's try Let's try James 7. James 4, verse 7.
Curtis.
Yes. Yes, David.
Just one other one, you don't have to go there, just keep in mind Absalom,
Absalom.
David's son. He coveted the king.
He covered his father's own throne. Yeah, I missed it.
He wanted to be king, he did all of these bad things, so lust came into him for wanting to be king. Then he sinned against his father by trying to manipulate and do all of this back office, back room stuff to obtain the kingship, to where many people died. Then when that sin was fulfilled, he himself died.
Yes. And in case it didn't say, David referred us to, you didn't hear him? David referred to the story of Absalom, the account of Absalom. Or through this deception. A man, a physical man, flesh and blood. He deceived all of Israel to follow him to become the king, and so he could take his daddy's throne. Because he desired to sit on the throne and rule over Israel. And I spoke on this once upon a time, a couple of years ago, I think, about how Absalom was the best type of Satan, at least in my opinion, my reckoning. Absalom was the best type or symbol, if you will, of Satan. In any case, let's go to James chapter 4, verse 7. Because we're about to close up here. We'll save this other stuff for part 2. So what do? Therefore, verse 7, James 4, verse 7. Therefore submit unto Yahweh, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near unto Yahweh, and he will draw near unto you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Wow. He said, purify your hearts, he said. He didn't say tell a demon to go away. He said, purify your own heart. Take the proverbial plank out of your own eye, if you will. Now, how do we do this? Let's turn to Ephesians 6. Ephesians 6, we're going to pick it up. Warner didn't look right. I was in Galatians. Ephesians. We'll pick it up in verse 10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in Yahweh and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of Yahweh, that you might be able to withstand the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, the rulers and principalities of this age, against spiritual hosts wickedness in heavenly places. Okay, verse 13. Take up the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, having done all to stand. Therefore, having girded your waist with truth, putting on the breastplate of righteousness. What does the breastplate of righteousness have to do with this? What is a breastplate? It goes over your chest where your heart is, a physical one, right? Now when you're putting righteousness over your heart, when you cleanse your mind and you purify your heart, just like James said to, this is what you're doing. It's kind of a short gist of it, but nonetheless, it's something to protect your heart. Having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace, above all taking the shield of faith, which you're able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Yahweh. Praying always, with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to the end with all perseverance and supplication for the saints. For me, that utterance may be given to me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, and that I may boldly speak. Is there any question or comment? Yes, Robert.
It's a good topic and a study because Joshua gave us an example in both Matthew and in Luke when he was tempted.
We're gonna talk about that next time.
So, okay, so I'll leave that for next time.
That's right, yes,
Also-
we'll leave that for next time, part 2, if you will.
But also too, you don't see anywhere in scripture where anybody says, oh, the adversary's really been busy or anything like that. You know, I think people give too much power in their lives when they're acknowledging him. Because we understand that there are consequences to our actions.
Mhm.
So
Yes,
sometimes we
there
do
are.
something and the consequence is something bad or something starts coming back against us. And so we have to start looking at ourselves as to why certain things happen. And when Job did that. He looked at, first thing he did was look at himself and say, you know, perhaps I have sinned against
Yes.
Yahweh. But he wasn't sitting around talking about, oh, the adversary's been really busy in my life and look what he's doing. He gave no acknowledgement of the adversary. He
That's
was trying.
correct.
So, and you just read that one passage, but in James, but also too in Ephesians, it says, give no opportunity, give no place to the adversary.
Yes, give no place to him, that's correct.
And
And
so
that-
in acknowledging we're giving him place, but also too, it all comes down to our actions, because remember, the adversary his sin was what?
Rebellion.
He was rebellion, he decided to serve himself, he will take the throne. And that's the temptation we all face, is serving ourselves. You know, we can become distracted chasing after things that our hearts desire, like Dave was saying out, it's our own passions and
Mhm.
desires, which leads us into temptation and sin. So, so it's not so much the adversary making us do it, it's just that he encourages us to follow our heart. And then you mentioned earlier the condition of the human heart, you see.
And at best, what is it he can do? At best, what he can do? He can go searching and looking for that proverbial chink in our armor.
Right, the adversary, it says that we're encouraged in Peter to be sober-minded and watchful, because the adversary is prowls around as a lion. He's seeking whom he may devour. Why? If he sees in you, he sees the things that you desire, he feeds that, which causes you to pursue your own way, to destroy yourself basically, to be selfish, to be self-centered, to anything that serves yourself, and it destroys any of the character of Messiah that would be in you, you see, that selfless character in nature. So we have to resist the adversary through the word of Almighty Yahweh in submission to his word.
And it's like we just read out of James in a nutshell. James 4 verse 7.
Yeah.
Turn to Yahweh and the devil will flee from you. Well, we're out of time right now, so actually there's more to be said about this, but we're going to do that next time in part 2, next time I'm up here. And next week, we'll have, let's see, we'll have Dennis for the main message, and we'll have Johannes for the study. Johannes be back up here 1 o'clock.